last week, the Burien City Council adopted Ordinance number 832, which rewrote their public camping law. This change was adopted as an emergency ordinance, which gave very limited opportunity for the public or the King County Sheriff's Office to review and comment. As the provider of law enforcement services for the City of Burien, we often collaborate and discuss changes to the city code, but they did not consult with us prior to passing this ordinance. We have an obligation to avoid engaging in conduct that has been addressed in federal litigation and found to be unconstitutional. Upon reviewing the new ordinance, we identified concerns regarding the ordinance's constitutionality. Since no law enforcement officer or agency is authorized to enforce an unconstitutional law, I directed King County deputies not to enforce the emergency public camping ordinance until those legal questions could be resolved. That is why today I filed a complaint in federal court seeking judicial review on the constitutionality of the City of Burien's emergency public camping ordinance. The complaint provides further details regarding the legal issues raised by the new ordinance. This step is crucial in ensuring that the rights of all people within our jurisdiction are protected and upheld, and our deputies have the guidance they need to do their work. It is important to clarify that while this case is underway, there is no change to the enforcement of all other criminal violations under our contract with Burien. I'll take whatever questions you have.
Can you explain the legal issues here? This, how this ordinance differs than, for example, Bellevue's ordinance?
Well, I'm not familiar with Bellevue's ordinance.
What makes this ordinance unconstitutional?
I'm going to ask Erin Overby. She's the King County Sheriff's Office Senior Legal Advisor. Erin?
I think to answer your question, you have to look at what the governing authority is in the Ninth Circuit, which is where we all work. And there are two primary cases. If you look at page 6 of the complaint, you will see the two primary cases are cited there. It's Martin versus Boise and also Johnson versus City of France Pass. And really what those cases are focused in on is making it a crime to have a certain status. And so in this case, we have concerns about whether this particular ordinance criminalizes things that people can't help. And in this case, that would be the fact that they're without housing. And so there are a lot of cases that talk about the two primary cases and decide whether or not particular ordinances are in fact constitutional. And we seem to be in disagreement with the City of Burien about where that line is drawn. But this most recent version of the ordinance is quite expansive. If you look at the details in the complaint, I think you'll see the language that caused the concern. We've highlighted it for you, and it identifies some of the definitions that are quite broad. There are, of course, zones now throughout the City of Burien that exclude camping at all hours. And it is important to remember that it is a crime. So if you're found guilty of this, it's a misdemeanor. And the expectation that we believe Burien had for us is that we would arrest people who violated this ordinance. And that's where the sheriff decided to take the action that she took.
So they didn't talk to you all at all, like the city manager, the mayor, no one reached out to you all?
Not with me, no. So this was an emergency ordinance that was passed. So normally there's an opportunity for public comment. Plus, as I was mentioning, there's an interactive process between the contract partners and the sheriff's office. We did not have a discussion on this expansion. They already did have an ordinance in place. This expanded, and there is a map which is included in the complaint, which basically shows the prohibited areas where public and camping is, well, it's not authorized in many places there.
Have you all spoke to them since filing this legal complaint?
Yes, I spoke to the city manager today, right after I filed the federal complaint, and let him know that he would be receiving a copy of the complaint, and I did provide him a copy.
And there have been assertions that this decision or your choice came down from the executive's office. Is that true, or was that your decision?
Absolutely not. This is 100% my decision. The executive gives me full authority for the operational considerations for the King County Sheriff's Office, and I made this decision. Yes.
Have you been frustrated with the Burien City Council and City Manager over both this handling as well as the previous camping ban ordinance and how that was rolled out?
What I would say is this. In an ideal situation, there is collaboration. I will say with the City of Burien, we have not found that level of collaboration, and so at times things are more difficult.
Does your office do any enforcement of the prior camping ban, and what would you say to cities who contract with the sheriff's office who look at this and have concerns about whether or not they can make their own ordinances?
I appreciate that question. So yes, we did enforce the previous version. So one key difference is at that point, people who were experiencing homelessness were offered resources, offered a place to go, right? They were offered housing. There were 2 social service agencies that were providing services to those who were homeless, and the city stopped those contracts. So the resources that the deputies had, and I'm talking Burien specifically, don't exist anymore. And so with this development of this new camping ordinance, they wanted us to arrest these people. And I don't believe that's constitutional. Let me just finish this question. For the other contracts, again, if this was with any other city, it's the same, right? If I believe ordinance, this is, as a law enforcement officer, we must uphold the state and the Constitution of the United States of America, right? And if there is a law that is not constitutional, I cannot, in good conscience, have my people enforce that. So this is why the claim in federal court to have a judge decide, is this constitutional or not? I don't know who was next. You.
On March 7th, the city let Evergreen Treatment Services know that they intend to terminate their contract with Reach. Do you think that could further put the city of Burien in jeopardy of violating the Boise decision?
Erin, do you want to answer that? I mean, that sounds like,
Well, I think that working with partners like Reach has been a real benefit to the Sheriff's Office because they have assisted the officers who are out there working the streets with knowing when there's available shelter space and where to find it and helping them find other services in addition to shelter. That's one thing that the community partners have been doing with the Sheriff's Office. They've been collaborating for many, many months, and so loss of that resource will adversely impact the work of the sheriff's deputies who are out there trying to enforce. But at this point, this particular ordinance is not being enforced by the sheriff's office.
Erin, while you're up there, I have a quick question on the legal case. So if Boise is overturned, if Grants Pass is decided not in city's favor, does that put this case at risk? And why go with a Boise standard, Grants Pass standard, instead of going for example, there's a lawsuit that says that this is cruel punishment that's been filed against the city of Burien by a group of plaintiffs.
I think you're maybe referring to the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment.
It's a state constitutional lawsuit. It's just sort of trying to get around the idea that Boise might get overturned.
It may and it may not. We don't really know what will happen at the end of the day, and so that is set for oral argument in April of this year. And it may be that the judge who receives this complaint waits to see what the Supreme Court does with that. We don't have any control over that. But the constitutionality of the prior ordinance is already the subject of litigation. That's already being litigated by a group of people who were impacted. The Northwest Justice Project is supporting that litigation. So there already is litigation pending on the constitutionality of the ordinance under state law.
Do ordinance like this put your deputies in tough situations, like trying to help people who are homeless without like enough resources? Like, is that hard for your deputies?
Well, of course. I mean, part of the reason people get into this profession is to help people, right? And when we can't help people, that's frustrating to us. So this particular ordinance that Burien passed, I felt was putting my deputies in jeopardy of violating the law. So not only difficulty in helping people who need it, but also putting themselves in a difficult situation. So that's why I made that decision, yes.
Was anyone actually arrested under the previous camping ordinance? Because my understanding was people were more being referred to services. Were there actual arrests made?
No.
And well, I mean, can you talk about what kind of arrests might be made? What sort of, you know, situations? Because I've
Well, we're
heard
not
that
gonna make any.
I understand
Okay.
under this ordinance, totally.
Yes.
But I've heard that there have been arrests, you know, related to other laws, perhaps, where sheriff's deputies have been going into encampments and arresting people.
Not in the city of Burien and not to my knowledge.
So no arrest for other misdemeanors or felonies or things
Well,
like
if they're
that?
committing other crimes, but not for, you know, being unhoused. I mean, that's not what we're for, to be used for. We are law enforcement officers.
What role, Sheriff, does the availability of services play into this? And is Burien in a spot right now where you've determined that legal requirement to have an open shelter, or, you know, whatever that is, according to your determination? Is Burien in that zone where those services are not available right now?
Correct.
Well, they said under, I've talked to the Burien mayor, and he says Martin v. Boise just says it has to be in the general area, so he says they're not in violation of this. What changed with this new ordinance that made you believe the deputies would be in jeopardy of breaking the law if arrests weren't made previously?
Well, do you wanna
Yeah.
answer that?
Once again, I'm gonna let you know that there are some real details that to be found in the complaint about specifically what some of the concerns are. One of them has to do with the map. So prior to this, there wasn't a map excluding people from engaging in certain conduct in Greater Burien, all throughout the city. If you look at the map, it's quite broad. There are designated areas where it's excluded, where camping is excluded, and then there are buffer zones. So there's not much left over. So there's that, there's the map and the expansive nature of the map. There's the fact that the city manager seems to have unfettered discretion in drawing the line at any point and in any way which he deems appropriate without any real public comment or notice or opportunity to be heard. And so we have people out there who may not even know whether or not they're in a place where camping is precluded. And then there's the language of the actual ordinance, and some of it spills over from the prior ordinance, but some of it is new and more expansive. And so if you look at the complaint starting on page 13, we've outlined for the court and for any of you who are interested in looking at more detail, the specific portions of the language that we think are concerning. So it's a combination of things. It's the map, it's the lack of notice and opportunity, it's the discretion to draw the line at any place at any time, and the language. So those are the major differences.
Yeah, I was just wondering what made this different from like CTAC's ban, because they have a similar one, so that.
Yeah, and CTAC does have a ban, and what they do is they provide notice to people who they believe are in violation of it. They also offer options to get people to a shelter space, and then they come back and remind them, and it's my understanding they have not arrested anybody under their ordinance. I mean, the goal of the team in Burien has been to connect people with services and not arrest people. And so they think that they have been doing a pretty good job of that so far, but this most recent ordinance felt like it was a little too much for them to deal with operationally.
Sheriff Cole-Tindall, what do you think of the way that City Manager of Burien has been operating? Do you feel that he's been operating in good faith? There's been a lot of actions taken in very rapid succession.
Well, what I would say is this. I am all about collaboration, working with our contracts or whomever. And I do think there have been some challenges with the city of Burien and specifically the city manager, yes.
Can you elaborate at all on those challenges?
Well, I'll just say that. I mean, I really want to focus in why we're here today, which is the fact that I am the lead plaintiff on this lawsuit that was filed in federal court.
2 more questions.
Is there anything else you would like to say about this that we haven't asked?
Sure. I guess what I would say is this. I think it is appropriate that a judge decide. And whatever that outcome is, our responsibility is to follow a lawful court order. So depending on what the judge finds, and we will follow that. So I look forward to that. The issue is it could take a while. I mean, this is not something that's gonna be resolved next week, I don't believe. I think it's gonna take a little bit of time. And I think that's okay, right? We are doing this is a process. This is a process that we have. So I was able to do this. This is unusual. I don't think the King County Sheriff's Office has ever done this. This is the first time, but I felt it was the appropriate step at this point.
Do you believe that homeless people's lives matter and that they deserve equal protection under the law, just like house people do?
Well, of course, right? I mean, I firmly believe I was on the board of DESC just until recently, but being the sheriff, it's kind of hard to also be on a board of a nonprofit. But yes, of course. I mean, I think most people believe that.
Okay, we'll wrap it up.
Earlier you said this is not a political issue, but a lot of people in Burien think it might be.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I don't think it's a political issue because I'm not political. I am an appointed person, and as I said earlier, the executive has entrusted me to run the operations of the King County Sheriff's Office. He does not tell me how to run the Sheriff's Office. So when I heard that Burien was saying this was political, or some of the people, the residents of Burien, I was surprised because this is, if you really take back the emotion, it's about, is this legal or not? Do we as police officers have the legal authority? That's what this is about. And my job is to protect not only the residents of King County, the unhoused, but also my deputies. I don't want to ever have them in a position where they are violating somebody's rights.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Good? Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.